The ruins were silent except for the soft crunch of boots on broken stone. Evan Carter adjusted the straps of his pack and kept walking. The old city was nothing but shattered towers and twisted metal. The sky was gray with dust, and the air smelled like burnt metal. His scanner beeped faintly. The damaged supply beacon he was sent to fix was close. He moved carefully between fallen walls. The war had ended months ago, but scavenger drones still roamed, and there were rumors of raiders. Evan had seen the bodies they left behind. He climbed over a cracked beam and froze. Somewhere ahead, he heard it. A soft sound. Not wind. Not machinery. It was crying. He followed the sound, stepping lightly. Behind a half-collapsed archway, he saw her. She was sitting on the ground, leaning against broken stone. Her clothes were torn and covered in dust. Her skin was a pale silver blue, faintly glowing in the shadow. She had long hair tangled with dirt and ash. Her left arm was bleeding. Her eyes were wide, wary, and filled with tears. Evan had seen her kind before. The Sarathan. They were tall, graceful, and known for keeping apart from humans. Most called them cold and distant. This one didn't look cold. She looked terrified. When she saw him, she stiffened, her hand reaching for a small dagger at her side. Evan raised his hand slowly. "Easy. I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't speak. Her breathing was fast. Her eyes darted toward the open street behind him like she was ready to run. "I'm human," he said. "Name's Evan. You're hurt. Let me help." Still no answer. But her hand didn't grip the dagger as tightly. Evan reached into his pack and pulled out a water bottle. He set it on the ground between them and stepped back. "It's clean. Drink it if you want." She hesitated. Her eyes flicked between him and the bottle. Finally, she reached for it, unscrewed the cap, and drank in quick gulps. When she lowered it, she spoke for the first time, her voice soft and melodic. "Why? Are you here?" "I'm repairing a supply beacon," Evan said. "Didn't expect to find anyone alive." "I was hiding," she said, glancing at the broken buildings. "The raiders came. My guards, they—" Her voice faltered. She looked away. Evan didn't ask for details. He knew the story. He'd seen it too many times. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she said quietly. "All right, Lyra," Evan said, crouching down. "Let me see that arm." She tensed but didn't pull away when he reached for her. He cleaned the wound with a small med kit and wrapped it in a clean bandage. She watched him work, her eyes still cautious. "You help strangers?" she said. At last. "Humans do not usually help without reason." Evan gave a faint smile. "Guess I'm not usual." Before she could reply, a low, distant rumble came from the sky. Lyra's eyes widened. "Engines," she whispered. Evan looked up. Through the dust, he saw shapes moving, small, fast craft, the kind raiders used for hunting survivors. "They're sweeping the city," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "If they find me, they won't," Evan said quickly. "Come on." He helped her stand, supporting her weight as they moved away from the open street. He led her toward a broken stairwell leading underground. The air grew cooler as they descended into the shadows. The tunnel smelled damp and old. Pipes lined the walls, some dripping water. Lyra leaned against the wall, her breathing shaky. "Stay here," Evan told her. "Where are you going?" She asked, to give them a reason to look somewhere else. Her eyes widened again. "That is dangerous." Evan gave her a half smile. "That's the point." Before she could argue, he was gone, moving quickly through the ruins. He pulled a few small charges from his pack, old mining explosives. He set them inside collapsed buildings, wiring them together. When the raider craft drew closer, scanning the streets, Evan triggered the charges. The explosions thundered through the city, sending dust and debris into the air. The craft turned toward the blast site, moving away from Lyra's hiding place. Evan slipped back into the tunnel, his face smudged with dust but otherwise unharmed. There Gone for now, he said. Lyra stared at him. You risked yourself. For me. Evan shrugged. Because it was right. She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand him. Her people didn't believe in risking lives for strangers. To her, his actions made no sense, and yet she felt something stir in her chest. In the dim light of the tunnel, the human and the alien sat in silence, the dust slowly settling above them. Outside, the ruins were still dangerous, but for now, they were safe. The air in the tunnel was still and cold. Somewhere above, the sound of engines faded into the distance. Lyra leaned back against the wall, clutching the water bottle Evan had given her. Will they come back? She asked softly. They might, Evan replied. Raiders like to sweep an area more than once. They want to make sure no one escapes. Lyra's silver blue eyes darted toward the shadows. If they find me, they will take me. I cannot fight them alone. Evan adjusted the strap of his pack and looked at her calmly. That's why you're not alone anymore. She blinked, as if she wasn't sure she had heard him right. We can't stay here, he continued. They'll search this place eventually. There's an old starport on the east side of the city. If we can make it there, maybe we can call for help. Lyra hesitated. The streets are open. They will see us. Evan gave a faint smile. Not if we're smart. They left the tunnel quietly, moving through the ruins in a zigzag path. Evan kept close to the shadows, guiding Lyra through collapsed buildings and over piles of rubble. He moved with practiced steps, his eyes scanning for danger. Lyra tried to match his pace, but her injured arm made climbing harder. More than once she stumbled, and Evan caught her before she could fall. You could leave me, she said at one point, her voice low. It would be easier. Not an option, Evan replied without looking back. They passed through what had once been a market square. The stalls were overturned, the fabric torn and flapping weakly in the wind. A burnt-out transport lay on its side, its cargo spilled and half-buried in ash. Evan stopped suddenly and motioned for her to crouch. Lyra followed his gaze and saw them, two raider scouts moving along the far edge of the square. They carried rifles and wore armor patched with scrap metal. The scouts stopped, scanning the area with handheld devices. Evan whispered, Stay low, don't move. They waited in silence as the scouts swept their scanners back and forth. Lyra's heart pounded. She had been in hiding for days, but the fear was still fresh every time she saw them. One of the scouts took a step toward their hiding spot. Evan's hand closed around a small metal sphere on his belt, a smoke charge. But just before the scout got too close, the other one called out, pointing toward the distant smoke still drifting from Evan's earlier explosions. The two turned and moved off. Lyra let out a shaky breath. You did that on purpose earlier, she said. The blasts. You wanted them to think survivors were somewhere else. Exactly, Evan said, but it won't fool them forever. As they moved on, the streets narrowed into an old service lane. The cracked pavement was covered in dust and fallen bricks. Overhead, power cables swayed in the wind. They stopped to rest inside the shell of an abandoned workshop. Evan checked the bandage on Lyra's arm, tightening it gently. She watched him, her expression unreadable. You are different, she said at last. Different from what? He asked. From the humans I was told about. They say you are selfish, that you take what you want and care nothing for others. Evan chuckled dryly. Some people are like that. Not all of us. Why risk your life for me? Because you're alive. That's reason enough. Lyra didn't reply right away. Her people would have called his reasoning foolish. Life was precious, yes, but only if it served the greater good of the group. Yet something in his tone made her think his answer was not weakness, but strength. The quiet was broken by a sudden roar overhead. Two raider craft shot across the sky, low and fast. Evan swore under his breath. "They've started a grid search." "What does that mean?" Lyra asked quickly. "It means they're scanning every street, every building. They'll be back this way soon." Evan moved to the back of the workshop and pried open a rusted maintenance hatch. A dark, narrow shaft yawned below. "We go down," he said. Lyra peered into the shaft. "Where does it lead?" "Old waste tunnels. Not pleasant, but safer than being out here." She followed him reluctantly, climbing down the metal rungs. The air grew damp and foul-smelling. The tunnel below was just wide enough for them to walk single file. Evan switched on a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. The walls were coated in grime, and water dripped from the ceiling. They walked for what felt like an hour, turning through narrow junctions and stepping over broken pipes. Lyra's feet ached, but she didn't complain. Finally, they emerged into a large underground chamber. It was part of the old sewer system, but one wall had collapsed, revealing a natural cave beyond. Evan set his pack down and sat on a flat stone. "We'll rest here. The raiders won't find us in this maze." Lyra sat across from him, pulling her knees close. "You act as if you have done this before." Evan nodded. "Too many times, different planets, same story." "You were a soldier?" "Not exactly, more like a fixer. I go where things are broken and try to make them work again." Lyra tilted her head. "Including people?" Evan looked at her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Sometimes." Far above, the distant sound of engines echoed faintly through the stone. The raiders were still searching, but down here, the darkness wrapped around them like a shield. Lyra leaned back against the wall, still watching him. She didn't know what fate awaited them at the starport, but one thing was becoming clear. This human was unlike any she had met before, and, for the first time since the raiders came, she felt a spark of hope. The damp air of the underground chamber felt heavy. Lyra had barely slept, even though Evan had promised the raiders wouldn't find them here. Every sound in the tunnels made her flinch: the drip of water, the distant creak of old pipes, the faint rumble from above. Evan sat nearby, quietly checking the small energy pistol he carried. He had a calm look, like he'd been in far worse places. When he noticed Lyra's tired eyes, he spoke. "We should move soon. The starport is still a long way, and I'd rather get there before nightfall." Lyra nodded, though her legs still ached from the day before. "Will there be help at the starport?" "Maybe," Evan said honestly. "It's abandoned, but there might be old comms equipment we can use. If it works, we can call for a patrol ship." "And if it doesn't work?" she asked. Evan's mouth curved into a small smile. "Then I fix it. That's what I do." They left the chamber, following the tunnels deeper into the city's underbelly. Evan led the way with his flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark. At some points, the tunnel narrowed so much Lyra had to turn sideways to squeeze through. At others, the floor was flooded, forcing them to wade through knee-deep water. When they finally found a service ladder leading up, Evan went first to check the street. He lifted the hatch carefully and scanned the area. "All clear," he said, helping Lyra climb out. They emerged into a narrow alley. The sunlight felt harsh after the dim tunnels, and the air smelled faintly of smoke. The buildings here were half collapsed, their walls pitted with scorch marks. Evan took out a small map display. "We're close, about 4 kilometers to the starport." They began moving again, sticking to the side streets. Along the way, they found a half-buried cargo container. Evan pried it open, revealing a stash of old emergency supplies, sealed food packs, water filters, and a roll of sturdy cloth. "Lucky break," he said, handing Lyra a food pack. She opened it carefully, taking small bites. "It tastes strange," she said, frowning. "It's human rations." Evan replied with a shrug. Not great, but it keeps you alive. For a moment they sat in silence, eating. The sunlight through the broken roof made dust sparkle in the air. Lyra spoke, quietly. You said you lost someone once. Your sister? Evan nodded slowly. She was caught in a raid like this one. I wasn't there to help her. That's something I don't want to repeat. Lyra looked down at her hands. I lost people too. My guards, my family. I thought I was ready for danger. I was not. Evan studied her for a moment. You're still here. That means you were ready enough. They pressed on, crossing what had once been a bridge. The center section had collapsed, leaving only a narrow beam. I can carry you, Evan offered. Lyra's pride made her hesitate, but the drop below was dizzying. Fine, she said at last. Evan steadied her, and they crossed slowly. Halfway across, the sound of engines made them both freeze. A small raider drone swept into view, scanning the bridge. Move, Evan said, pushing her forward. They reached the far side just as the drone fired. A bolt of plasma scorched the beam behind them. Evan grabbed his pistol and fired back, hitting the drone's sensor. It spun out of control and crashed into the rubble below. That was close, Lyra breathed. Too close, Evan agreed. They know we're here now. The last stretch to the starport was the most dangerous. The streets were more open, with fewer places to hide. Evan kept watch in all directions, his grip tight on his pistol. They reached the edge of the old landing field by late afternoon. The starport's main building loomed ahead, its roof partly collapsed, its windows shattered. A faded sign still clung to the front wall, its letters worn away by years of neglect. Evan led Lyra inside. The air smelled stale and dusty. Their footsteps echoed in the empty hall. Stay here, Evan said. I'll check the control room. Lyra followed anyway, curiosity outweighing her fear. She found him kneeling beside a broken comms terminal, his hands working quickly. Will it work? She asked. It's old, Evan said, tapping at the controls. But I think I can get it running. For a brief moment, hope filled the air, until a sharp metallic click echoed through the room. They turned to see 3 figures standing in the doorway. Not raiders, but other survivors. 2 men and a woman, all armed with makeshift weapons. Look what we found, one of the men said. A working terminal, and a Seraphin noble. Lyra stiffened. We need this to call for help, the woman smirked. Oh, we'll call for help, all right. The raiders pay well for important prisoners. Evan's expression hardened. That's not happening. The survivors stepped closer, their weapons raised. Lyra's pulse quickened. She glanced at Evan, who gave her the smallest nod, a signal she didn't fully understand, but one that told her not to panic. Whatever happened. Next, she realized Evan wasn't going to let them hand her over without a fight. The air inside the ruined control room grew tense. Evan stood between Lyra and the 3 armed survivors, his stance steady but relaxed, like he'd been in worse situations. You don't want to do this, he said evenly. One of the men laughed. I think we do. Raiders pay in food, fuel, and weapons. That's more than this place can give us. The woman's eyes stayed locked on Lyra. You're Seraphin royalty, aren't you? The raiders will pay triple for you. Lyra's heart pounded. We came here to send a distress call. If you help us, there will be rescue ships. Enough for everyone. The second man shook his head. Rescue ships take time. Raiders pay now. Evan's gaze didn't waver. Then I guess we're not going to agree. The first man stepped closer, his hand tightening on his weapon. That was the moment Evan moved, quick and precise. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until the weapon clattered to the floor. With his free hand, he shoved the man backward into the second attacker. Run! Evan barked. Lyra didn't hesitate. She turned and bolted out of the control room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Behind her, she heard shouts and the sound of a struggle. Evan's boots pounded the floor as he caught up with her. "They'll follow us," Lyra said, glancing. "Back. Not for long," Evan replied, pulling a small smoke charge from his belt. As they reached the main lobby, he tossed it behind them. Thick gray clouds filled the corridor, choking the air and hiding their path. They pushed through the broken doors into the landing field. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. "There," Evan said, pointing to a cluster of maintenance carts near the far wall. "If we can get one running, we can be out of here in minutes." They reached the carts, but most were rusted beyond use. Evan knelt beside one with its engine housing still intact, prying it open. "Can you fix it?" Lyra asked, keeping watch. "Can fix anything," Evan said with a half-smile, pulling wires and tools from his pack. His hands worked quickly, reconnecting fuel lines and bypassing damaged circuits. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. "Get in!" Lyra climbed into the passenger seat as Evan slid behind the controls. The cart shot forward, rattling across the cracked pavement. The sound of engines behind them made Lyra's stomach sink. She turned to see the 3 survivors in another cart, speeding after them. "They won't give up," she warned. "Then we'll make them," Evan said, steering sharply into a narrow service road between hangars. The chase turned dangerous. The rival cart slammed into a wall of debris and skidded, but quickly regained speed. One of the men raised a makeshift crossbow, firing a bolt that whistled past Evan's head. Evan gritted his teeth. "Hold on!" He swerved hard, sending their cart through a half-collapsed hangar. Sheets of loose metal clanged and fell behind them, blocking part of the path. For a moment it seemed they might escape, but then a new sound filled the air. The deep, throbbing roar of raider engines. Lyra's blood ran cold. "They're here!" Evan glanced upward. Dark shapes swept across the sky, banking toward the starport. "They must have picked up the heat from the engines," he said grimly. "We need to get out of the open." Ahead, the service road climbed toward a rocky ridge outside the landing field. Evan pushed the cart harder, its engine whining as they raced toward higher ground. Behind them, the survivors slowed, caught between chasing Evan and avoiding the raiders. That hesitation gave Evan and Lyra just enough of a lead to vanish over the ridge. On the far side, Evan parked the cart behind a cluster of boulders. He shut off the engine, letting silence settle. "They won't spot us here right away," he said, scanning the horizon. "But the raiders will spread out soon. They'll try to box us in." Lyra sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly. "We cannot keep running forever." "No," Evan agreed, "but we can make it to the canyon east of here. If we set traps along the way, we can slow them down." "You think you can fight them?" she asked, half in disbelief. Evan's expression was calm but firm. "I think we can survive." They waited until the sky began to darken, then set out on foot, leaving the cart hidden. The rocky terrain made it harder for the raiders' scanners to track them. As they moved, Evan began gathering scraps from the ruins they passed, a broken fuel cell, discarded wiring, shattered drone parts. Lyra didn't understand at first, but when she saw him setting a tripwire between 2 rocks, realization struck. "You're turning the canyon into a trap," she said quietly. "Exactly," Evan replied. "It's not about winning the fight. It's about making them waste time and keeping us alive until rescue comes." By the time they reached the edge of the canyon, the stars were visible above. The air had grown colder, and the wind whispered through the rocks. They found a small overhang to shelter under. Evan knelt by a flat stone, setting the last of his makeshift charges. Lyra watched him work. "Back at the starport, you could have escaped alone. Why didn't you?" Evan looked up at her, his eyes steady. "Because you deserve a chance to live. Same as anyone." Lyra didn't answer. She turned her gaze to the dark horizon, but inside, something had shifted. A quiet understanding that this human wasn't just helping her out of duty. He was helping her because he chose to. The alien city was silent that night. Even the glowing towers seemed dimmer, as if the entire place was holding its breath. Leon walked beside Arya through a narrow pathway between silver trees, their leaves whispering in the wind. The air carried a strange mix of tension and hope. Earlier that day, the council of her people had given Leon a choice. He could walk away now, return to his ship, and never see Arya again. Or he could stay, but only if he swore loyalty to their cause. A cause that would mean standing against dangerous forces far beyond his world. Leon had spent hours alone thinking about it, and now, with Arya walking quietly beside him, he knew he had to speak. "Arya," he began, his voice low, "you know what they're asking me to do. It's not a small thing. It could mean never going back home." Arya stopped walking. Her glowing eyes turned toward him, sadness and fear mixed in them. "I know," she said softly, "and I would never force you. You've already done so much for me. For all of us." He studied her face for a long moment. She had changed since he first met her. No longer just a scared, hunted woman, but someone willing to fight for her people. Still, he saw the weight she carried. "You're brave and beautiful, Arya," he said again, the same words that had made her cry when they first met. "And that's why I can't just walk away." She blinked, her lips trembling. "You mean, you'll stay?" Leon nodded slowly. "I'll stay, but not because of their demands. I'll stay because you're worth it. Because what's happening here, it matters." Her hands came up as if to reach for him, then hesitated. "Leon, if you stay, you'll be a target. They'll come after you just like they come after me. You could—" "I've faced danger before," he interrupted gently. "And I'm still here. Besides, I'm human. We don't back down when something is worth fighting for." For a moment, the only sound was the leaves rustling above them. Then Arya stepped closer, close enough that Leon could see the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If you stay, you won't just be helping us. You'll be part of us." Leon tilted his head. "Is that a promise or a warning?" Her lips curved slightly. "Both." They kept walking, the path winding toward the great hall where the council waited. As they reached the massive entrance, Leon could see several tall alien guards watching them. Their armor shimmered faintly, and their expressions were unreadable. Inside, the air was cooler. The council chamber was built of crystal and metal, the walls catching every flicker of light. The elders were already gathered, their long robes flowing as they turned to face him. "You have decided?" the eldest asked, her voice like distant thunder. Leon stepped forward. "I have. I'll fight alongside you, but I have one condition. I answer to what's right, not just to orders. If I see a better way, I'll take it." The elders exchanged glances. It was a bold statement, and some of them looked displeased, but the eldest only gave a slow nod. "So be it. From this day, you are one of us, human Leon." Arya's breath caught beside him. For the first time since he met her, he saw pure hope in her face. The meeting ended quickly, but as they left the hall, Arya caught his arm. "You really meant it, all of it?" she asked. "Every word," he replied. "I'm here for the long run." But even as he said it, Leon knew this was just the beginning. The enemy forces were gathering. Shadows were moving in the far reaches of the city. Somewhere, someone was already making plans to strike at Arya, and now at him too. Yet he felt no regret. If anything, he felt more certain than ever. Whatever came next, he would face it head on. Because sometimes, one choice can change not just a life, but an entire world. And Leon was ready for that. The stars stretched endlessly outside the ship's viewing deck. Their gentle glow reflected on the glass, casting silver light into the quiet room. Ryan stood there, hands behind his back, staring out into the void. He had been through battles before, but none had left such a mark on him as the last few days. He heard soft footsteps approach. The sound was careful, almost hesitant. Turning slightly, he saw Elara, the alien woman who had fought alongside him. Her elegant features were framed by the faint shimmer of her silver hair, now slightly messy from exhaustion. There were faint scars on her skin, signs of the wounds she had taken for their mission. She stopped a few feet away, clutching her hands together. "The repairs on my ship are almost complete," she said quietly. "I will be leaving soon." Ryan's chest tightened. It was the natural end to things. Allies went their separate ways after a mission. But it didn't feel right. Not after what they had been through. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice steady but softer than usual. "Yes." She looked down. "My people are waiting. They think I'm still the same." He frowned. "Still the same?" Elara hesitated before answering. "Before I met you, I only knew humans from stories. They were always described as reckless, unpredictable, dangerous. And maybe that's true." She looked up at him now, her eyes shining in the soft light. "But they never told me humans could also be kind." The silence between them was heavy, but warm. Ryan took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're brave, Elara," he said firmly. "Not just because you fought, but because you faced things that would terrify anyone. You made choices that saved lives, at mine included. You're beautiful, too. Not just on the outside, but in here." He tapped his chest gently. Her eyes widened slightly. The words hit her harder than she expected. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then her hands trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes. She blinked quickly, but one tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. Not in a way that felt real. She took a slow breath, and a small smile appeared through her tears. "Thank you, human." Ryan felt something shift inside him. He wasn't sure what it was, maybe relief, maybe connection. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "I just told the truth." She laughed softly, wiping her face. "You humans, you always say things like that, but you don't realize how much power words can have." Ryan stepped closer, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship's engines filled the background. They stood side by side, looking at the stars. Finally, Elara broke the silence. "There is something you should know. My people, they don't like humans. If I return and speak well of you, I will be questioned. Maybe even doubted. But—" She paused, her voice steady now. "I will tell them the truth anyway. That a human saved me. That a human taught me courage can be gentle." Ryan glanced at her, his brow raised. "You'd do that? Even if it makes things harder for you?" "Yes," she said simply. "Because if I don't, then nothing changes. And maybe, someday, our people won't look at each other as enemies." Something about her words made him feel both proud and a little sad. He knew that change in the galaxy didn't happen overnight, but it had to start somewhere, with someone. The ship's comms broke the quiet. "Docking preparations complete. Departure in 10 minutes. Elara turned to face him fully now. "I suppose this is goodbye. Or just until next time," Ryan said with a small grin. She tilted her head, considering that. Then she smiled, a real, warm smile. "Until next time, human." They walked together to the docking bay. The lights glowed dim, casting long shadows across the floor. Her ship was waiting, sleek and silver, with its engines humming softly. She paused at the ramp, turning back one last time, Ryan stood with his arms crossed, but there was a rare softness in his expression. He gave her a nod, the kind that carried more than words could say. She took a deep breath, then boarded. The ramp lifted, the doors closed, and the ship began to rise. Ryan watched until it became just another light in the stars. As he turned to leave, he caught his reflection in the metal wall. Tired, yes, but with a faint smile. Something told him their paths would cross again. Far above, Ilara sat in her pilot's chair, hands steady on the controls. Her heart still carried his words, and she whispered them quietly to herself. Brave and beautiful. For the first time in a long while, she believed it. And somewhere in the vastness of space, two different worlds had taken their first small step toward understanding, all because one human dared to speak from the heart.